strawberry blonde,
Mm-hmm.
reddish, and she was just
Went
white
that
like this
beautiful
as well.
color.
So
Yeah. So this is the book, and we're doing it also because it's February, of course. So it's like the love month, right? But what was interesting to me is I got this calendar this month, which said that the 13th is Valentine's Day. And it was actually really funny because I actually went mall walking with a good girlfriend of mine on the 13th. And then we went and had a glass of whiskey afterwards, and we were like, yay, Valentine's Day. But I think like what's really interesting to me and over the last few years has been the whole self-love movement, and how that has become as much, I feel like, a feature of Valentine's as all the like regular classic, Hallmark cards and chocolate and roses and couple piece. It's there's this dialogue I feel that we've started as a society of getting into, like, let's talk about like how we're loving ourselves and how we're paying attention to who we are and how we show up. Do you think that's been a big shift in the recent years?
yeah, I mean, even I was watching, I think it was, I don't know what I saw. Oh, Mark Manson, who
Mm-hmm.
wrote The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck and Everything is Fucked, which I think are brilliant books.
Brilliant
I love
books.
them. And he was being interviewed on the Drew Barrymore show along with I think it was Dr. Pooja Lakshman, she's also a I want to say psychiatrist. She is a frequent contributor for New York Times
Mm-hmm.
and specializes in women's health and or women's mental health. And I follow her on Instagram, really like her, super just interesting woman and nice. I even like, she was one of those who I saw her on Drew Barrymore and I was like, oh my gosh. I reached out to her on LinkedIn and I was like, your work is wonderful. I love all of your columns in New York Times. Like, I just think you're the bee's knees and I just want to say thank you. And she wrote me back. She was like, oh my gosh, it's so nice to connect. And, but
I
anyways,
love.
they were on the Drew Barrymore show talking about self-love. And it was actually an interesting angle. It was more
Mm.
of like it was more of like the conversation around self-care
Mm-hmm.
versus self-love, and
Mm-hmm.
they're different,
Mm-hmm.
and I think and I one of the conversations we have very often in the healthcare community is that self-care ends up being this band-aid for very shitty systems within healthcare that
Mm-hmm.
make it
Mm-hmm.
very challenging for healthcare workers very often to do the work that they love to do and to do the work that really helps people to achieve health and wellness in their lives and good outcomes, superior outcomes, right?
Yeah.
And superior patient experience. And so self-care has become this like, credo and this, band-aid. It's like putting a band-aid over, an exposed jugular that's pumping out blood
Mm-hmm.
at an alarming rate. And it's just not really, it's a part of it's a piece of the puzzle, a small piece. It's not the whole answer, but so I think it's an
Right.
interesting conversation, like that whole
Right.
self-love, self-care. And they were debating it on Drew Barrymore. And it was like, I don't know that they quite got to the
I think this is
crux
much
of it.
more fundamental. Like so
Yes.
for me, when I think about self-care, it's much more about like, am I prioritizing the practices that will allow me to take care of myself? So like, am I working out? Am I sleeping? Am I getting therapy? Am I having time with my friends? Am I ending my day effectively? And then like, am I having a nice bubble bath? Am I having massages? Am I having my hair cut? Like for me, that is more about those little actions that are about taking care of myself. Whereas the self-love is, for me, is it's that sort of deep sense of acceptance. And I think what, the thing like that he talks about all the way through this book is it's a practice. It's a practice, it's a practice, it's a practice. And you can get into it and you can fall off it. You can get
Yep.
into it, you can fall off it. And he gives all these
Yep.
different tools for how to do it. But one of the ways that I think about it a lot, and the way that I coach around it a lot, is that when you have an intuitive hit to do or not do something, if you follow through on it, you're creating that feedback loop of self-love, which is like, I'm going to listen to myself, I'm going to value the messages that I'm receiving, and I'm going to act on them. And when I act on them, that creates this cycle of self-love, right? Rather than like, you getting the ding, 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 like, like, I mean, even on like these funny levels, like I remember being pregnant with my third, and just like, by that point, I just started learning to ignore the need to pee by my third trimester with my third baby, because I was just like, this is ridiculous. And then at like some point I was like, the fuck am I doing? like, you know, and
spend my whole life in the restroom,
right,
for God's sake. Yeah.
And I still to
Right.
this day will have this point where I'm like, oh my God, I've been needing to pee for like an hour and a half and I've just been ignoring it, which is like not self-love. It's
Not
not
healthy for your
self-love.
bladder.
Yeah,
Not good
exactly.
for your
It's
bladder.
not
Your bladder doesn't like
self-love.
that. It becomes
It's not
neurogenic. No,
self-love.
we don't like that. No.
You know, so it's like, but for him, you know, so I love the way for him it was this like constant reminder to be pulled back in, like, you know, and as he talked about like his breakup, right, and how like he'd like text her and then be like, oh shit, or he'd look out the window and it'd be raining and he'd think, oh, you know, and it's this constant like pulling back and, you know, sending yourself the right kind of messages, you know.
Yeah. I thought it was a very honest conversation. I mean, one-sided, I guess, because it's
Yeah.
his opinion in his book. But like, I thought it was a very honest conversation about just the ups and downs and going through some sort of a, not only kind of a loss, you know, or the death of like a part of you, or the death of a relationship, but also just that idea of, you know, how much time do you spend in relationship with yourself?
Yeah.
Right? Like
Yes.
that was a lens that I thought was really interesting, that I thought of after, like, we spend a lot of times in a lot of time in general in relationships. I mean, I spend a lot of
I can't hear you. Is that me or you?
I have relation. Oh, I think my
Oh, there we
microphone.
go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I lost you for a moment there.
I have, you know, I have relationships with all sorts of people, right? And I've spent a lot of time building those relationships, whether it's for the benefit of my business or for, you know, clinical care or whatever, or my kids.
Mhm.
And do I spend, from a very honest standpoint, the same amount of time developing that relationship of authenticity with myself? And I kind of had to pause and think about that. I'll be honest. I was like,
yeah, right. And I think, you know, I mean, the thing that was really interesting to me about that was the way he recognized that, like, the more you do that and the more comfortable you get. And the question he asked, which I did a Facebook Live on a few weeks ago because it resonated so deeply with me, was like, what would I do if I truly and deeply loved myself? Is that, like, the more you work on developing that relationship with yourself, the more it pushes you to a place where when you have a choice to make, you're making it from a very different place when you are deeply embedded in that place of self-love, right? So, you know, when he talks about that, like, all freedom starts within. Like, I loved that line. All freedom starts within. So if we don't cultivate that relationship within, that deep love within, that trust within, by acting on the feelings we have, making choices that will serve us well, we're not giving ourselves freedom, and we're not creating that deep, abiding self-love, which I think is so vital. Yeah.
I don't, you know, I have to admit, like, I saw the, it looks like we have a handful of people watching. I'm going to refresh this here, like about 5 people watching. If you're here watching,
hello,
put a little hello in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Let me refresh this and see if I can't get it to, it looks like we were paused there. Okay, good, we're back. But I think, oh hell, what was I even saying? That's so funny. I go to,
you talking about
I'm like a perfect example of how multitasking is you know, most humans are not good at multitasking. And I always used to tell patients that. They'd be like, oh, I also have this thing. And I'd be like, just wait, just give me 1 second. Let me just, I am terrible at multitasking. And I just want to provide you the best experience possible. So hold on to that. Write it down if you must, put it into your phone, and just give me one. Let me finish this. We'll put this away and then full attention back. You know, it's kind of like, oh, hi, Jim. Jim just listening while I work.
Hey, Jim.
Excellent. Welcome. Happy to have you. So anyway, so back from multitasking, I think I was speaking to
your relationship with yourself. And I just said that, like, the more you cultivate that relationship with yourself, it's easier to make choices.
Oh yeah, and using that as a lens or a framework in essence. Like I thought that was so interesting of thinking, you know, how do I make decisions? And I was just having a conversation with a client a couple of weeks ago about, you know, she had texted and said, hey, I'm not feeling well. I may, I don't know, a day or two before our session, and she's like, can we reschedule? And I feel really badly. And I was like, yes, absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
why, right? Like,
Why wouldn't
right?
we?
Like, why wouldn't we? Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I ask clients, right? Like, as best you can, right? Let's give
Yeah.
each other 24 hours, right? I think
Yeah.
that's, a way to be respectful in terms of other people's time. And the reality is, shit comes up, and what are you going
Right.
to do?
Right.
And I started to think, and we had kind of this little back and forth, and I said, I want you to ask yourself that if your best friend called and you two had dinner lined up, and honest to God, she said to you, I don't feel well. I'm just, in a pandemic or not in a pandemic, I don't feel well. I'm really tired. I'm super exhausted. I would like to cancel, and I'm sorry to do it. And maybe we reschedule. And she was like, oh yeah, like, I'd be like, yeah, like, you
Right.
do you. Take care
Yeah.
of you,
Right.
I said, and so I said, why is it that when the lens comes focused on ourselves, it sometimes is not the same conversation, right?
Right. But I think also that's for women have this sense of like, we just have to suck it up and push through. Like, I remember that, like when you start getting periods, and I remember at school, like very clearly there was I've got my period, I can't swim, I can't play hockey, I can't play tennis, like, and I was in the like, fuck that, I'm not going to let any of that hold me back, stop me, slow me down, which in some ways was good. But when I started practicing Iyengar yoga, in Iyengar yoga, you when you have your period, you announce it in the class, and she gives you a completely different practice. And it's a very different way of doing yoga. And it was really fascinating to me. And the first time I did it, there was part of me that was like, there's men in the class, that I don't know, like, really, I'm gonna be like, hi, I've got my period, everybody. And right? Like, I was like, but it was for them, it's like, this is a medical thing, like get over it. And
It is
then
what it is, like,
and then you just do
life.
this amazing, nourishing, restorative sequence where you're like Baddha Konasana against the wall with ropes to pull you up, and you're doing like, forward folds, but you're folding over a bolster or over a blanket, right? Like just lots of props. It's not about activating the core, because your core is so you're not doing upside down. You're like, right? And it's like, and I remember the first time I did it, I was like looking around the room being like, I wish I was doing the forearm stand, and like, and like having a look. And then I was like, stop. And then 2 or 3 months into doing this, I was like completely hooked on that, for me, which felt incredibly loving and gentle and nourishing, to do these poses that were not like core and engaged and active and and that I was just completely honoring my system.
Yeah, relevant, very relevant to kind of where you were. I mean, that's not I don't know that that's a way that that it's the most common way that people show up in the world, like, like, let me make sure that, I'm honoring myself and my own needs. Like, I just, like, I work very consciously to embody that type of energy, to say, and that's only a shift. Hell, I'm about to turn 40, and that's like a shift that's happened for me in the past couple of months. Not right, like fill my cup first, and then and respond in a way that honors the now and how it is and how it feels, and I mean,
and regardless of everybody else, because that was the other piece that was really interesting to me, because I remember the first time being like, isn't that going to be a pain for you? Like, you've got this class mapped out, and you've got 16, 17 students who you're going to be guiding through it. And Iyengar is very, hands-on and engaged and stop and check and alignment, and I love it, right? It fulfills that like super nerdy aspect of me, right? But like I remember being like, isn't that going to be really stressful and awkward for you, that you're going to be having to go do this pose for 2 minutes and then do this pose while you're trying to teach that the class? And she's like that's what I'm trained to do. Like, I'm here, and that was the other piece of it. Not only was the like, I want to keep up and like be with the group, there's the other part of me like, I'm going to be annoying, like, and I don't want to be annoying, and like
this isn't normal. Right. Like, this isn't like, yes, as if to come into the space and say, conforming into somebody else's, mold of what is normal and what's accepted. And like, without any, respect paid to where you are, how you show up, and your needs in that moment. And what a beautiful gift to be able to give that to someone, to say, you here based on what you need right here. You here based on what you need. for
Right.
you?
And the more I did it,
Like,
like there was a woman who showed up who had like broken her foot, and she like did a whole like practice for her around the fact that she'd had a broken foot, you know, and it was amazing. And then there was a woman who was pregnant, you know, who'd like, it was her first baby and she hadn't been doing it. So she's like, and I like the, you know, and I went for like 6 or 7 years every week to this 90-minute class with a girlfriend. And it like, and it totally changed my understanding of yoga being this like vinyasa push chaturanga pumping music Lululemon tight ass beady thing kind of model of yoga, which is so often promoted in the US without any of that spiritual bit, but also the like, you know, yes, it's a group class, but I as a teacher can hold space, and like the way she masterfully held space for the needs of everybody, which to me was such a sort of loving act, which I'd never experienced in any other kind of quote unquote exercise space before, you know?
yeah. And you wonder if you can't, right? Like what level of self-love do you have to have? I think that's similar to the work that we do too, right? Like as coaches, right? Like what you have to have, I think, is your own, you know, your own North Star in essence, right? Like if that piece isn't there, it's, I think, not coming from a place of integrity and authenticity to sit and, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
right. Like I can tell my clients, like, love yourself, go.
Yeah,
Now
right.
go love yourself.
But then at home you're like standing on the scales going, shit, I shouldn't have eaten that cupcake with my kids, and like, why did I have a glass of wine with Jonathan, and like, fuck, I should have got up at 5 and worked out, and you know, like that's not, yeah.
Yeah, you know, like who am I trying to be, right? Not only to right. So I think it's interesting, you know, it's one thing to have that, to develop it within, you know, your oneself, right? And then it's that second lens of, can you not only develop it within yourself, can you really pull it out of others, you know, to live in a, to come from a space of you know, pure self-love. Like that's a, I don't know that that's how the majority of business is done, or, you know, how the majority of, and, you know, from my view, healthcare is provided.
Right.
You know, without,
Right. No, right.
without,
And it's about,
without it being that imposition, or without it being
right.
that, oh,
Like, oh,
you know,
cool. Right. No, and I think like one
yeah,
of the other things that
exactly.
he talked about in here, like that relates to that, which I really like, is this idea that you have to create love yourself rituals, right? And so
Mhm.
it's this combination of like the sort of the regular intentional practices that you do. And I talk about this a lot with my clients. Like you want to have these daily intentional practices of taking care of yourself, you know, whether like it's the green smoothie, whether it's the morning journaling, whether it's the meditation, whether it's the date night with your husband once a week, whatever those things are, right? That are this, but then you also have tools that you can use when you're in a reactive state to help pull you back. And I love the way he said, you know, that life rewards you when you pay attention to its gifts. And I think what's really interesting for me is that when you cultivate these self-love practices, you start to see, like, it was funny this morning, we were walking, like I went with I'm here in Florida with my friend Harry, like Sunday morning, I was like doing a Facebook Live and I chatted with my friend Harry afterwards on FaceTime, and he was like running on a sweaty beach. And I was like, I need some vitamin D on my skin. So I literally booked a flight, and like 5 hours later, I was on a plane to Florida, which is like kind of how I roll, but also just like slightly crazy. But you know, one of the things is that I was talking about and thinking about was this whole practice of like, how do we create these rituals, right? That can be reactive. And I was sitting there going, oh God, here we are, we're going into another week of weather in the teens and snow days. And like, that just like, if, and I think if I had a partner and I'd been sitting on the sofa with a lover, on Valentine's Day, it would have maybe felt different. But I was like sitting on the sofa of my own being like, fuck this shit. Like, I want to be kissed by the sun, you know? So we're walking down to the beach this morning and he's looking at the sunrise kind of going, it's going to be an okay sunrise this morning. Like, it's not great. Like, is it? And I was just like, the fact that I'm in shorts in February and I'm outside and the weather is humid and it's like 77 degrees. And like, I was like, that's just heaven for me. And I'm going to get to put my feet in the ocean, like hallelujah right now, people. You know, like, I'm not grading the sunset. I'm not saying this is a 6 out of 10 or like, I'm just like, right? Because he sees it every day. You know, for like 3 years he's done this walk, and you know, so for him he's like looking at it, and for me I'm like, no, like this is heaven, thank
Yeah, I mean, it's a good example of how your thoughts can influence, the circumstance doesn't change. Everybody's seeing the same damn sunrise, for the most part. Might change a little bit in terms of the spray of sun on the clouds and, the views that you see. The reality is everybody is experiencing it, and the perception is very different, right? Based on kind of, right, the thoughts that you bring into it. Yeah, no, I like that.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking about warm sunsets and beaches and feet in the sand and
right. I mean, that's the thing, and the other line that he had in there that I've like been like circling in my head a lot in the last few weeks was he says, when you hit, so in a kind of reactive way, right? Because for me, I find that a really useful distinction when I'm coaching people and when I'm like managing my own stress and difficulties, right? Is the like, yes, I have these daily practices. Yes, I meditate every day. Yes, I journal every day. Yes, I eat good food. I move my body, etc., etc., right? And I have rituals around that and commitments to myself. Like he talks about that in the book, right? Like the only true growth and evolution and amazingness comes when you commit to yourself. But he talks as well about how, so you start these practices and like people show up, right, who are going to help you on that like dream that you've created in your head, right? That like the people come, not like all of this stuff starts happening, which he's like, I didn't know what else to describe apart from magic. But then you have these moments when your heart is breaking or like things go wrong, and he described the importance of exhaling the carbon dioxide from your mind. And I love that like visual, because we get all tense and like the scalenes get all tight and we get all like, and it just like that activation, which stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system, lowers the heart rate, all of that stuff we know from exhaling. But this idea of like the carbon dioxide in my mind being vacated, I was like, it just was such a good visual for me. I was like, oh yeah, I need to exhale that fucking restrictive carbon dioxide from my mind, right?
Garbage. Yeah, get that shit out of there. I mean, yeah, exactly. I think too, interestingly, and I would be curious, do you do the practice of daily habits, meditations, things that nourish you? Do you do them from a place of, self-love? Do you do them from a place because, do you do them from the standpoint of this is a way that I can show myself love, and giving myself the nourishment that it needs to be the best version of itself? Or is it doing the practices to find the self-love?
Oh, that's a really interesting angle.
And I wonder if it's a little bit about the belief, right? Like if I go into that whole scenario and I say, it's kind of like applying like a, like where are you in the belief that self-love is important or has value in your life for yourself, right? And so if you probably, right, I imagine at one point in your life you said, I don't have as much belief that this is important, although I think it ought to be, I think it could provide me some value. I don't quite get it, right? I think we talked about this last time. I cannot see the telomeres expanding
when I meditate.
Right. However, I still think it probably will do me some good. And then now, the lens of, 2, 5, 7 years later of having that practice developed and then stepping in, it's like your belief comes along with you where you're like, oh, yes, of course this works. Of course, this is the way in which I show myself love. And I don't do it in order to tell myself it works. I do it because I value it as an integral part of being like deeply in love and nourishing myself in a way that feels loving standpoint.
That's an interesting point. I think what's interesting, I remember having this conversation with my first Ayurveda teacher about like what to do when we hit that wall of being like, oh my God, like I really don't want to be getting up at 5 to meditate, whatever it is, like you have that kind of feeling, and then you have this whole like the shoulding on yourself of like, okay, but I have to do it. And I think, it's interesting. Like, I think we go in ebbs and flows around these things. And I think, sometimes for me, my ritual self-care practices, whatever you want to call them, are practices that do give me a deep sense of self-love, and like I just love doing them, you know, like there are some days like in the, you know, like when it's summer in Cleveland or like, you know, September, and, you know, my alarm goes off at 5 and I walk outside with my dog and I'm in shorts and a t-shirt, like that is just like, so yes, I'm supposed to be exercising and moving my body and all that shit, but it feels just like it's a treat, like it's a reward, like it's not a like I gotta check this off the list, right? Whereas, you know, at this time of year in Cleveland, I find myself, it's like 2 o'clock and I'm like, shit, I still haven't taken my dog for a walk, because I really don't fancy putting on a face mask and a hat and gloves and finding like the grabby things to put on the bottom of my shoes so that I don't slip on the ice when she tugs. You know? And I find myself like being like, that's something I've got to check off my list for her well-being and my well-being, you know? And I think that's sort of part of that natural cycle, you know, is that we go through that. Like I've had that relationship with journaling. Like I've gone through stages where journaling feels like something I should be doing. And I know if I do it, I'll feel better. But the actual act of sitting down to me right now doesn't feel good. And other times when like it just feels really juicy because I can just feel like everything pouring out and clearing, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. Can I share this one quote? Because I think this was one of my favorites in here, which was, I once asked a monk how he found peace. I say yes, he said, to all that happens. I say yes. And I read it and I was like, yep. It's like, you know, your degree, I think Byron Katie says it, something to like, so, you know, your degree of suffering is based on how much, you know, you want to disagree with reality. And,
right.
You know, you get to choose. But I read this and I was like,
yes, right. Yeah, right. It's that lack of resistance, right? I had this really interesting conversation with my therapist yesterday about like expectations as I go into things and my expectations of how they're going to go. And then when they don't work out that way, my massive resentment about the fact that they didn't work out the way that I'd wanted, or that I told people that it was going to work out this way. And then people were like, so did it work out that way? And you're like, no, it fucking didn't work out that way, you know? And he was just like, you just have to like say yes to what's coming up, regardless of which way it goes. And it reminds me a little bit, one of my podcast guests, when I asked her favorite quotation last week, said, it's a Winnie the Pooh one, wherever you go, there you are.
There you are. Yes.
Right? Wherever you go. So it's that same thing of like, if you're like disgruntled and annoyed with what's going on here, like moving to a different state, moving to a different room, like you're still gonna freaking feel that. You know? Like,
exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Right. Sun still rises in Cleveland, Ohio, just as it does in Florida, right? And you know, it's still going to be there, right? Why we interpret it differently, we have some different thoughts about it. I don't know. We just do.
Right.
My other one that I really liked in here was there are a lot of good ones. I like actually too, just of note how the style of this book was written. I like just the shorter chapters, and I noticed the same with Untamed in terms of Glennon Doyle. How just like shorter kind of snippets, right, of life. And I appreciated that. This is the one where he's talking about expect magic in your life, right? You don't have to wait for life to show you magic, right? In fact, go all in on loving yourself. Expect magic. When you look for it, it will find you. But it helps to notice when it starts rather than chalk it off to coincidence, or worse, pay no attention at all. So he says, feel grateful when you experience magic. Want to take it even higher? Feel grateful before you experience magic, just expecting it. Then watch life pour it on for you. I'm not saying this because it sounds good. It just really works. Just try it. And it's not rocket science. If you live life, I'm willing to bet you've experienced the same. So if you loved yourself truly and deeply, what would you do? Me, I'd expect magic and feel grateful for it. I hope you do the same. I liked that. I thought,
no, because it's that you know, it's that thing of like it speaks to the connection you have with the universe, right? I mean, I was talking about that this morning in my business group for my group program, Cleanse and Create, about spiritual freedom. And you know how when you feel spiritually free and you prioritize spiritual freedom, you are recognizing your connection with nature, with other humans, with animals, with the planet, you know, with God, if you believe in God, right? And it's this recognition that you're not alone, right? And that when you prioritize and value your connection to other in whatever way that makes sense to you, whether it's through, you know, a religion like Hinduism where it's multiple gods, whether it's a religion like Catholicism where it's one god, whether it's, you know, Buddhism with this sense of, you know, releasing the ego through connection with others, and that everything you do impacts others, whichever way you do it, right? Whether it's just that you like, it's Mother Gaia, right? And your spirituality is recognizing the flow of that. It's that connection with other people. And I think that's really was another really powerful piece of this book was his like, you know, kind of like ding, 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 like pay attention, like we're all connected. And that's a good thing. And it's a beautiful thing. I mean, it's a little bit, you know, like it's the seriousness of it. I think that it's really easy with like self-care and self-love to be like hashtag self-care, hashtag self-love, like bubble bath Chardonnay, you know what I mean? And like to sort of minimize the deep power of this work.
Right, like this white wine is self-love. No, it's not.
Exactly. Right. And so, you know, one of the things he says in there, which I also really like, is you have to take a vow. You have to vow to this work. And, you know, he says one of the things he starts with is you have to forgive yourself, and that none of this work is easy if you're holding on to, you know, I fucked up. I shouldn't have married this person. I shouldn't have taken this job. I shouldn't have bought this house, like whatever it is, like all the things that we do to ourselves. And that, you know, he has this whole big piece in there about like the first step is forgive yourself, release it, right? And then make a vow, commit to loving yourself every which way. And it was so interesting today as well, like, so Howie was like, hey, can I take some photos of you like in front of this mural? And I was like, you know, because basically the last 3 months I've just like eaten whatever the fuck I wanted, whenever the fuck I wanted, whatever. If my kids made spaghetti bolognese, like, so like in this last sort of 6 months I basically released all of my like, you know, vegan, plant-based, whatever, and just like whatever, whenever, right? And so I was like, oh god, I haven't worn shorts in like 6 months. And, you know, so he's like, let me take photographs here. And I like found myself when he heard about my phone looking at them being like, am I gonna look at these and be like, fuck, you know, like why didn't you suck your tummy, you know what I mean? And I looked at it and I was like, oh my god, I look fabulous. And I was like, this shit works, you know, because I was like, I'm like really
now the question is, did you decide you were fabulous before you looked at the photos?
No, I didn't.
Right.
You caught me.
Right. It's not what we think of it. It's what we tell ourselves prior to it going in. Say, I'm going to open the photos, and
but I actually did wear the shorts though. Like 3 years ago, I wouldn't have even put the shorts on, you know?
Yeah.
You know, so I put the shorts on and like went for it. But yeah, no, good point.
I mean, isn't it kind of funny? We're sitting here talking about you wearing a pair of goddamn shorts. I mean, I love you so much. And we're talking about, you know, wearing a pair of shorts, like for the badassery that we've both done in all of our lives. And we're talking about putting on a pair of goddamn shorts. I mean, do you know what I mean?
No, I did.
You know, and it's not from a place of judgment, because I feel like I get, like, I've gone through it too. I just got a set of professional pictures done. And I went through them with a lens of a very critical eye. And I like this conversation actually, because even before I said, did you look at it? I didn't look at the pictures first and tell myself, whatever these pictures are, they're a full representation of me and who and everything that I embody. I went in there with like, oh, where's my hair fucked up? Where'd my teeth not look, nice and white? Where are my boobs looking super enormous and me not having a torso, and I mean, it's just, so I live and learn. It's a practice. It's a daily, it's a practice just as much as he says, right? And I think you said in the beginning, one that we get on board with, one that sometimes we aren't as consistent with, maybe. At least I can speak to that from a lens of experience, but it is a practice, I think. And it's a practice first and foremost before anything that we do. Wear the shorts, look at the pictures, right? Like, cancel the coffee date, like, it's choice.
Yeah. Right. And it's this constant coming back to, and I think that's the thing that's going to stay with me for this book. Like the two things they're really going to stick with me. One is that, when I constantly embody the energy of what would I do if I truly and absolutely loved myself, that then gives me the power to choose in a way that really suits me. So I think, and that when I commit to it and I take this as a serious vow to myself, then my life will change. You know, and I think that's the stuff that I'm going to take away and really embody and practice and coach around and coach myself around and coach my clients around, is this practice of what would I do if I truly love myself? Whether it's like throw away that pair of pants that's been in the back of your closet for 4 years, haunting you, that you haven't got back into again. Whether it's like actually deciding not to go to that yoga class and like sitting on the sofa with a book and a cup of tea is more self-loving right now, right? Like canceling the thing, doing the thing, going for that 5-mile run. But the more you learn to listen and respond to that and create that feedback loop, that's when the magic happens.
Yeah. I think one of my biggest takeaways that I love and that I've been using often, and I've been using with a couple of clients, is when he says, when the thoughts come in of not having self-love, just mark them as not useful.
Oh, yes, the James Altucher one. Yeah. Yes, not useful. Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's lovely. Not useful. Nope, that one's useful.
Yeah.
Nope.
Not useful.
Right.
Ding, ding. Go away.
Right, good.
Like wipe it off. Bye-bye.
All done. Not useful.
Right.
You know, I love that. I think it's a great, I've caught myself several times going into kind of a negative thought pattern and telling myself, I have a choice here, and that one's just not, it's not fucking useful. So
right. So that thing about the choice, that's the thing, right? Like it's funny given that our book last month was the choice, but it's like the choice. And then like the more you do this work, the more the choice becomes obvious, right? Because it's like, this is the self-love, this is the love, this is the fear, right? This is the shitty, this is the negative, this is the not going to serve, right? Yeah, baby. Yay. This is so juicy. All right.
This is a good one.
This is a good one, everybody. Yeah, highly recommend. Love yourself like your life depends on it.
Very quick read. And I think, I think there's some good, useful tips in here. I always love a good self-help book. I mean, always looking for some ways to, up level my game in terms of how I show up in this world. So I appreciated this one. What are we doing next time? I can't remember what we've got coming.
Are we doing
for
the
next
one? Was March burnout?
You know what? Let me look real quick. I'm gonna find out for us.
We created a list, but I can't remember what it is. Me neither. I was hoping I was going to rely on your memory for that one.
All right. Oh, March, Permission to Feel.
Permission to Feel. Oh, this is such a good book. So this is a really fascinating book. I read about half of it already, and it's written by this guy who has created this whole research center, which is all about how we can understand emotional intelligence and how, as humans, most of us can only recognize a few emotions, like less than 7, I think most people recognize on people's faces. And that creates massive impact in terms of how we engage with others. And so he's created this research center. I think it's at Yale or Princeton. I think it's at Yale. I need to double check.
He was on Brene Brown.
Yeah. He did it. So yeah, you can listen to his interview on that. That's where I heard it and was like, and I like paused the podcast halfway through and like bought the book. I was like, I must read this book. Yeah.
I feel like that I may have ordered the book as well, or maybe I got it. I have to look and see. I wonder if I can't remember if I bought it and read it or if I got it from the library, but either way.
It's a white book with red and blue letters on it. Yeah, it's fabulous. Yeah. Okay. So that's what we're doing next month. Permission to Feel. And and I think we're going to have some interesting conversations about how that's part of what we do as coaches, is give people permission to feel and process and move through it. And how, also as parents, I feel like that's a huge area that we, we're not serving, and serving our children. And in terms of education, it's interesting. I look at that and I'm like, I think it'd be much more useful for my kids to know how to evaluate information and construct an argument with and without an emotional connection, right? So can you play devil's advocate? Can you argue intelligently about something that you don't believe in? And can you articulate and understand and label all of your emotional experiences? This is going to be juicy.
I completely agree. I think this will be a good one. I'm really looking forward to it. It is on Tuesday, March 16th, 9:30 to roughly 10. We usually go about a half hour, 45 minutes. And again, the book is Permission to Feel by, I think it's Mark Brackett is the author.
Yeah. He's awesome.
So, okay, excellent. All right. Well, looking forward to it. Always a pleasure to have a chat with you and to continue to enrich our love of books and to share that with someone. Do you know what's so funny? I mean, I love to read. I love to read before I go to bed at night. And so last night we were sitting at the dinner table, and my youngest son, we were talking about ways to prepare our bodies for bed and healthy habits that can help us,
Wind
kind of
down.
go into a more slow pace and to calm our bodies. And I was like, and I've noticed that they're starting to draw a little bit and just to doodle and do some drawings. And I was like, if that feels like it's a good way for you to feel like your body is calming down, good for you. And my littlest Ryan, he was like, it's kind of like how you read at night. And I was like, it is how I read at night, because I love to read, and I just love seeing that in them too. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yay.
like
Babies.
heart swelling moment as a mother.
Yeah.
Like, so I pass on
Yay.
anything to you. Yes. And reading's one of them. I feel like I've inspired, right? I've inspired motherhood. So it's good. So, all right. See you next month in March, and enjoy your time in Florida. Safe travels to you, and see you on the flip side. You're not missing much but snow, just a lot of white stuff here in Cleveland, Ohio. So, stay down there as long as you can. Okay.
All right, my lovely. Bye.
Okay. Bye. Good to see you.